Hey, Howard Jacobson here. Welcome to today's Plant Yourself podcast. A quick reminder, this podcast is free for everyone and supported by patrons. So if you would like to find out about becoming a patron of the show and helping us out, helping defray the cost, helping to spread the message, you can do so at plantyourself.com/gift. Thanks so much and enjoy today's episode. This is the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm Howard Jacobson of Plant Yourself, Sick to Fit and Well Start Health. Let's start with a little theme music, shall we? All right, I'm so excited to bring you this conversation with Will Bonsall. Will was on the show, episode 224, and I remember that off the top of my head because it's one of the episodes that I have been telling people to listen to the most. One of my sort of top 5 in terms of how important it is for everyone, for individuals, for communities, and really for our civilization. And when we talked about Will's Radical Self-Reliant Gardening, also veganic, which means no animal inputs, the world seemed like it wasn't ready for it. Like it's, sort of a weird hippie thing to do, very fringe. And of course, now we're living through a pandemic in which our food supply is shown to be completely vulnerable. Not just meat and dairy, but tons and tons of potatoes rotting because there's no trucking to get it to the places because our food supply has been set up for industrial use, commercial use, rather than for individuals. We're seeing panic buying, and we're seeing how a compromised labor force can't get us the food we need and how vulnerable we are because we don't have local food supplies. So enter this idea of radical self-reliance, which doesn't seem so radical anymore. So in our conversation, I talk with Will about a couple things in particular that we really didn't cover that much in the first interview. The first is particularly what this pandemic shows us. And honestly, Will didn't need this pandemic to know that our civilization is built on very faulty foundation when it comes to feeding ourselves. And let's be honest, imagine if the food supply ran out in the United States, how many hours would it take for the entire civilization to break down? Probably, it's been said that, we're three meals away from an insurrection. And I think we've seen that can be pretty true. So we talk about what this pandemic should teach us and should really light a fire under our butts to start doing in terms of beginning to make our communities more self-reliant for food, for fuel, for staples that we need to live so that we don't have to rely on fossil fuels, on giant monocrops, on factory farms, on global shipping of produce from all over the world. And that's not to say that we can't have those things. We can still have pineapples and avocados and bananas, but that we don't need them to survive. The second thing that we talk about in detail is his scatter seed project, which is think of it as like Noah's Ark for biotic diversity. So imagine right now we're growing, like most of our calories come from 3 or 4 basic crops, right? Wheat, corn, oats, soybeans, rice, and these are grown in giant monocultures and are very susceptible to pathogens, to diseases, to pests, to all sorts of things that could, go through one of these fields and really decimate the entire crop. Think Irish potato famine, where they were all kind of the same type of potato and they all went under to the same pathogen. The Scatter Seed Project is Will spending 40 years of his life and pretty much all of his money, all of his disposable income, saving seeds. He's got 900 varieties of potato. He's got hundreds of varieties of foods, tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, that we don't, they may not be the best things to grow right now, but maybe in that treasure trove is a plant that has the genetic material to withstand some plant pathogen, some plant pandemic that could wipe out crops. So by losing this, we're losing the diversity of our agricultural, our horticultural heritage. And Will is spending his life trying to save it. And you'll hear about that in this conversation. And also, right up front here, I'm going to encourage you, plead with you, if you have funds available. If you are doing okay in this time and you're looking for a really, really good cause, one that can save the planet, one that is in line with vegan and veganic principles, please check out his Patreon. Just go to patreon.com and search for Scatterseed, Scatterseed. And he doesn't need much to keep this going, but it really is in peril right now. It may shut down. It's expensive to run. Will is not getting any younger, as he remarks. He's approaching 70 years old, and we need this thing. And the world needs it. And right now, I helped him set up a Patreon, and I'm his only patron as I'm recording this on Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. So I would love to, by the end of the week, to see 50, 100 patrons coming from Plant Yourself. I would feel like I've done something really important in the world if that's the only thing I ever do. So I'll be back at the end of this interview, at the end of this conversation, to let you know how you can work with me if you want, and how you can support me and Plant Yourself if that's your gig. But right now, let us dive in to the conversation about gardening our way through calamity with Will Bonsall. Will Bonsall, welcome back to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thanks. It's very good to be with you, Howard.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you today, and one of the reasons is, with the pandemic, and there's a lot of interest now in gardening and self-reliance. So as we planned our spring and summer garden, I got out your book, The Essential Guide to Radical Self-Reliant Gardening, and in reading over the introduction, I realized you kind of talked about this period, and you've written about the calamitous times, which have left the 21st century world in shambles. And so I kind of wanted to talk to you about like what you saw, writing 10 years ago, and preparing for times like these, and how we can get to the other side, in better shape than we started. So maybe begin by just like telling us a little bit about yourselves. I know we talked almost 3 years ago on this podcast about veganic gardening and farming, but kind of give us the cliff notes of your bio before we get into topics.
Well, yeah, sure, okay. I'm a typical hippie, back to nature, homesteader, self-reliant farmer gardener, and yes, among the things that a lot of people know me for is, number one is the system of farming that we have, which is veganic in the sense that it's not only growing vegan foods, but growing them without animal inputs like manure and bone meal and stuff like that. And so that's one part of it. And also my scatter seed project, which is an effort to basically maintain and make available for distribution seeds or germplasm, which includes seeds and cuttings and things, for a vast variety of crop plants. And so that's also. But what you're referring to also as sort of as a would-be visionary, I guess, I've also written on the topic of sustainable civilizations, and the book that you're alluding to, Through the Eyes of a Stranger, basically describes a futuristic civilization which is sustainable, which has, as you just said, passed through a calamitous times, in other words, some kind of a dark ages or something, and has reemerged with a lot going for it. And just incidentally, there's a sequel to it, which is like 90% or 95% written. It's very close to being done, which I'm hoping to come out with in the next year. People keep asking about it, and I'm trying to not only finish it, but more than that, scrape together a little bit of money to get it self-published. And it basically continues with those themes of what a sustainable society might look like. Right. There could be any number of examples, and this is just one of them.
So let me start by asking a question that might be screamingly obvious, but probably not to most people, which is, what is unsustainable about our current society? Or maybe a fairer way to say it is, what was unsustainable about our current society 6 months ago that we might not have noticed?
Well, lots of people have noticed. I mean, a huge percentage of people, maybe most people. Not everyone has thought of it, had any idea of what would happen, and I certainly didn't, or what might be done about it. And I certainly do have thoughts about that, and plenty of other people do. They usually refer to them as futurists. I don't have a word myself, but the key aspect, I think, of any sustainable society has got to be, number one, its food and energy base has got to be sustainable, which is to say that sustainable basically means something you can do over and over and over and over again, and without requiring inputs that are not sustainable. In other words, the classic example, of course, is non-renewable energy. Having a civilization based on fossil fuel is the epitome of an unsustainable civilization. Other aspects of it, as a civilization that's trying to be sustainable, should not be imperialist. It should not be depending on other parts of the world, other countries, other societies, particularly not for its key inputs, again, like petroleum and food and things like that. It should be much more self-reliant. Those are the main ones that come to my mind. On more smaller community scales, I think a truly sustainable community would not be totally reliant on outside sources for its health care and certainly for its culture. Just an example is people in my small state of Maine, and maybe where you are, when they want to go to a good concert or a good play or something, they have to go to a distant city, Boston or New York or something, and not as if there isn't any talent here, but we've gotten so centralized that that's where we go. We go somewhere else for our education, somewhere else for our technology and so on. These things don't originate from among us. And in a truly sustainable society, that would be much more so. There would be much more control over the inputs. But I think of the really big ones, the ones that really count, are food and energy.
Mm-hmm. And so, for a lot of us, things looked like they were kind of going swimmingly. Like you go to the supermarket, the shelves are always full of food. You can get any kind of food you want. You can get, your hippie organic foods and your plant-based nut cheeses and Oatly. And, it was unsustainable. And, the energy that we got was from like strip mining, mountaintops in West Virginia or nuclear power plants. But we didn't really notice until like this pandemic hit. And it looks now we're starting to see the cracks in just about everything. What do you want sort of, aside from just sort of panicking or staying home and wearing masks in public, what kind of lessons would you like people to draw from how the world is cracking right now?
Well, again, I would not say that we didn't know, we didn't see it coming. We didn't see the specific thing. There's any number of calamities of scenarios, and so we didn't see the specific thing happening and couldn't. But no, it's been on the horizon for a long time, for many decades, if not many generations. It's just been an incrementally evolving situation, and many people have noticed it. People have been writing about it, talking about it, maybe for millennia. We've been seeing civilization as it evolved become less and less sustainable and involving calamities. We've had lots of calamities before, and this one seems to be particularly worrisome at the moment. But as far as what we can do about it, well, let me put it this way. When I first moved back to the land, I got out of college, I left my hometown, I bought some land out in the country, and I came here with a rather, frankly, a romantic idea of what I was going to do. I was thinking very individualistically. And most homesteaders, I think, tend to do that. Me and my family were going to be thoroughly self-sufficient. It didn't take very long to realize that wasn't going to happen. It wasn't working. We are, as Hillary Clinton says, it takes a village. We're part of no man is an island. We're part of a larger whole. And whatever level of self-reliance or self-sufficiency we attain, however good that might be, we still... it's not adequate we can't basically, like some of the survivalists, buy a lot of ammunition and some 50-gallon tins of peanut butter and head off into the Rockies or something like that. It's not a sustainable option. It just isn't. We need to not only get ourselves more self-sufficient, which is basically impossible to begin with, but we need to do things to make our community more self-reliant. And that's one of the things that I face, and I think in some ways we all do, is a big percentage of the people in my civilization, in my community, even with this, in the course of this virus, still don't see the need for it. They're just looking forward to when Walmart opens up again or whatever, that they can go back to their normal. They're not generally seeing a need for or a desire for more, a need for more personal self-reliance. And I don't know that they're going to after this. We've been in this rut for so long. A lot of people are not going to, but people are. It is having a huge effect. You commented on For example, my scatter seed project, which is basically an effort to maintain genetic diversity. I've been shocked this year. I can't tell you how many queue of emails I've got and mailbox. I mean, of postal mail, regular snail mail, of requests. It's much more than I've ever had before. And I find out from friends that, for example, Johnny's Seed Company is apparently they're shut down as far as individual customer orders. And a friend at Southern Exposure Seeds in Virginia says they're having triple the volume of requests. A lot of seed companies they're running out of seeds. This is really unprecedented, and it's an indication that people are starting to figure out something. The last time I had anything comparable to this was both Y2K and the 7/11. These were occasions where people started thinking about things. Yeah. But again,
but you mean 9/11?
I don't know what I said, but yeah, the bombing, the terrorist bombing, and then also the Y2K, the concern about with the change of the millennia, that planes are going to start falling out of the sky, and all kinds of things were going to happen because of not being able to digitally adjust to the new millennia, saying a 2 instead of a 1, and so, but still, those things had some profound effect. But still, basically, society went back to same as usual. And I remember, during the oil embargo and stuff back in the Carter administration and stuff, where all kinds of people started doing all kinds of things, solar panels and everything. And then the Reagan years came along, and basically everyone was go back to the party. So I'm not too confident that civilization itself overall is going to make profound changes.
Right.
But segments within it might communities.
Right, and one of the things that really attracts me to your visionary work, and especially through this the novel Through the Eyes of a Stranger, is that you clearly state many times that this is your civilization that's sustainable is not a utopia. It has problems, and it's one version that could work. It's not the only version. It seems like part of our job now is to start, instead of genetic diversity, to have kind of visionary diversity, to see what we can come up with that will be able to, survive in some future really unpredictable ecosystem.
It's true. I mean, we not only need diversity of seed, genetic diversity of our crop plants and stuff, but we do need diversity of institutions, diversity of different types of governments, different types of communities, and different visions. For example, Asperia, my non-utopia, but my sustainable civilization, as I've described it, happens to be atheist, basically because I am. Am I saying, therefore, that a civilization has to be atheist to be sustainable? I'm saying nothing of the kind. They happen to be vegans. Is that a hallmark or a necessity for a sustainable civilization? And I'm not saying it is, although I am saying that basically it's ecologically much more efficient. A society can sustain a much larger population, a much higher standard of living, with more health on a smaller footprint than a animal-based civilization. But still, there are other ways of...
well, I was actually quite convinced by the description of what's like the differences between the veganic culture in terms of, what you need in terms of fencing to, your relationship with predator animals, which is very different if you don't have prey animals that you yourself are preying on. And also, obviously, the untold story of this pandemic is when human beings eat animals in a concentrated fashion, that diseases jump.
Yeah, I don't know that this particular pandemic is associated with that. I'm not sure. I don't know if anyone knows exactly how it originated. But some other things have. Ebola absolutely was. And generally, a lot of the worst human illnesses, ailments, including the Black Plague and so on, have definitely been associated with our intimate dealing with animals, eating them and having them close to us, especially closely related. Like in Africa, Ebola is not the only disease to derive from people basically eating primates, bushmeat, so-called. And so, there's a definite connection there. Even without it, I think diseases proliferate. There's certain factors in a society that encourage diseases, and especially plagues. And I think the animal connection is a very significant one. I don't know that anyone's made any such connection in this particular case.
Right. So the line that got in your book, Essential Guide to Radical Self-Reliant Gardening, that got me to call you again was this. I'll just read it. It says, of course, any strictly personal solutions only guarantee that you will become a target for those who have not developed any of their own. Which, like, that's the weak link, because I've been doing sort of permaculture and prepping a little bit, and everybody else in the prepping websites and the blogs and the podcasts is also talking about guns and ammo, as if, if you're not doing that, you're missing a piece of it. And I find that, distasteful, but there's also a part of me that goes, they're right. If I have the world's, best sustainable garden on the, an acre and a half in my backyard, how am I going to defend it? And so you talk about like community solutions. How do we begin? Like if people are listening to this, let's say they're in the suburbs, they have a lawn that they could start to convert. Like, what are the steps that we could take as individuals, both to model and lead this transition to a sustainable civilization?
You put it very well. Model and lead; those are two very, very key inputs. Well, I could tell you about a specific community-focused thing that I'm working on currently. I think we've just discussed in the past, maybe my scatter seed project. The main problem that I've had over the years with doing it, that's why I'm losing a lot of stuff now, the stuff that I'm trying to preserve, is a lack of sustainable funding, is not having a resource that I can count on year in, year out to do this. And some time ago, a couple of years ago, I started trying to work on the idea for a business, basically a nonprofit, but a sustainable business enterprise, which would generate enough, basically a cash flow, enough of a revenue stream to support my scatter seed project, which itself is totally dependent. It's like a public library. You can't expect it to support itself. It's very important to civilization, but it doesn't have its own wherewithal within it. So come up with an enterprise to do that, to basically generate those funds. And that was my main objective for this. Since then, I've moved ahead with a project which, now a number of us, we've formed a board of directors, and we're incorporated within the Maine state law as an incorporation. And we're calling it EVE, which is capital E, capital V, capital E. And it's an acronym for Asparian Vision Enterprises. Now, anyone who, like you, has read my book will have some idea what's meant by the Asparian Vision. But even if they don't, it's a handy word. It's a handle we're working with, and we're calling it that. But the basic, even though my initial objective of EVE was, again, to provide funding source for a scatter seed project, it's grown far beyond that. And this gets to what you're saying about a model and resource. Its overall basic mission statement is to increase our community's self-reliance for food and energy. Now, that's ignoring the fact that most people in the community don't see that as a concern, could care two poops about it. But to increase that, and the specific method that we're going about it with, we're taking advantage of a current opportunity, is to start by starting a local health food store. There already is a local health food store, but its owner is retiring, and we're wanting to start one which is much better in the sense of carries a lot more variety of stuff, but the source of the stuff in this, you go to any health food store, and almost everything in it comes from somewhere else, if not another country, and relatively little. Even stores which pride themselves on a lot of locally grown stuff, it's a small part usually of the offering in the store. It's usually pretty much confined to the produce section, and so we're planning to do that. But our idea, our business thing is to begin with is organized into 3 divisions, or 4 eventually. One we're calling Eve Market, and that's what we're talking about, a health food store. The second one is Eve Farms, which starts with my existing farm I'm on right now, but basically includes other local organic growers and stuff, and also Eve Kitchen. And we're wanting all 3 of those units. So basically, I or the other farms in the area, we produce the produce, not only to sell in the health food store, in what we're calling Eve's Market, but also to process, to go to Eve's Kitchen, the processing facility, to freeze, pickle, can, whatever, make products that we in turn sell in the health food store or distribute throughout the state. So basically, and eventually we want to move into Eve Energy, having solar and other. So basically, we have no utility bill. We're basically producing our own, at least our own power, if not selling power. So the ideal model here is then you've got at least that segment of the area's food and energy that are being produced completely in the area. In other words, not just not buying in power from outside, not buying in the ingredients from outside, not buying in the major components of this. Then you've got a radically different type of a business. And by the way, this is all designed to be propagative, that we just start off with a very modest enterprise like the health food store and use the revenue stream from that to generate the others so that we could go on expanding indefinitely. And that's the key feature here. So this model is not just something we'll do to patch up some cracks here and there, but we'll begin solving certain problems. And in the process, solve eventually the community we define as the area, the state of Maine or the region or something. So, at some point, we're talking about the world. I mean, what is our community? It's,
so let me ask you about that, because someone could listen to this and think, oh, well, that means I have to restrict myself. I have to lower my expectations. Like, 200 years ago, pretty much everything we ate was grown within 50 or 100 miles. Any entertainment that we got was live, local performers. Now we have this whole wonderful world of global shipping, of connectivity, of internet. Are you saying that we go back to a kind of Paleolithic life in order to be self-sufficient?
Oh, very far from that. Very far from that. No, it's assuming people would continue doing whatever they're doing now. We would have no control over it, but we would make a lot more available in. Like right now, people buy apple juice, for example, and it comes from wherever, some other part of the country, maybe the Northwest or something. And those that can be produced here, that's not going to stop people from buying coconut and oranges. And in fact, we're assuming that Eve's Market would carry, cashews and carob powder and all those kind of things. But as much as possible, we would like to things which are on the shelf, which do not have to be bought in from somewhere else that we could make locally. We want to do that, and we probably do. We could to encourage people to maybe have more apple juice for breakfast instead of orange juice. But we couldn't enforce that even if we wanted to. People will continue doing what they're doing, but they'll have the options of. And this area, frankly, is kind of ground zero for the locavore movement. There's already they're very popular, and a lot of people would be very happy to buy and eat much more locally grown stuff if we provide it. So, no, we're not thinking of exerting any particular force over people, but making things available. And I should emphasize, by the way, that this is, to some extent, I won't say it's pie in the sky. Up until not too long ago, it was basically, wishful thinking. We're moving ahead with this. We are incorporated. We do have some investment, some revenue sources lined up to begin it. Nowhere near enough. So that's the main thing that's holding us up right now. It is the main thing. To need basically pump priming money to basically jumpstart the idea. But basically, as I said, the thing is designed to be self-propagative. Once it gets going, that it generates its own resources to expand. But you mentioned earlier, and I think it's very important. We don't have any expectation of expanding too far, like probably not out of the state, if that. And so in terms of actually selling and doing things like that. But we do see an infinite capacity for exporting our ideas, and as you say, being a model, so that someone out in Tucumcari, New Mexico, or Tampa, Florida, or something will hear about this thing. Maybe they have me. I'll be speaking at Chamber of Commerce or something, or writing a book about Eve, so that this becomes a model, and other people do the same thing somewhere else, and maybe not the same thing. Again, we're wanting our Eve Market will be vegan. So we'll not be carrying dairy products and meat products and so on. Some other place might not do it that way. They might be some religious-based, a church-based thing. Where a lot of health food stores are run by people with a religious agenda. They might do that. Ours is not. So I'm just saying, other people will take the ideas and do with them what they want. But we'd like to provide a model for.
Yeah. So sort of indulge me with a thought experiment. So we're seeing food shortages. We're seeing food insecurity to some extent in the United States, and it probably will get worse. Around the world, certainly hunger is going to be a huge issue. I just returned from South Africa, where people in lockdown have no income and are not, and there's not going to be enough food and not enough money to buy food for people. If the pandemic or the calamitous times continue to crack our civilization apart, including our food supply chain, both distribution and cost and safety, what would having a network of Eve markets and Eve enterprises do to local communities to kind of make them more resilient and to allow people to live in the face of more shocks like the one we're having now?
Well, you just used the word that I would have used. It'll make them more resilient. It doesn't necessarily make them immune, but it gives them many more tools. Basically, the whole idea is giving people more control over their individual lives and over their community lives. The communities can be more self-contained. By that, I don't mean insular. I don't mean cutting themselves off, but not being decimated by something happens someplace far away. So that's how I see it working. And again, I don't know how far we could go with it. It'll depend. Even if we had limitless amounts of money, for example, to work with, there's a limit to what you can do beyond the local community. We're not trying to make. We're not. It's not part of our idea to make other people dependent on us for food any more than we want to be dependent on others. So to try to enable other communities, other individuals to, again, copy and model what we're doing to what extent they want to. That's the main thing I see that we could do. I don't know beyond that what anyone could do.
So, I mean, one of the things that really struck me about the novel...
Oh, and incidentally, just to interrupt you for a minute, we're talking about this current thing, and everyone is obsessed with this current thing, and for damn good reason. But, sooner or later, this is going to be over. Probably later than sooner, but it's going to pass, and it won't be as bad as the plague. I don't think a third of the people alive today will be dead, but however disastrous it gets, it'll pass, and people will go on living their lives. And so I'm not so focused on this as the next one, and the next one, and the next one. We are heading increasingly for one calamity after another. And so just simply to look at this one I think it's very flawed, because it's going to tend to, like Y2K and then the oil embargo and stuff, when it's going, we're going to breathe a deep sigh of relief and, okay, good, now I can go back to McDonald's and, go as I was doing. So I'm much more focused on a much more long-term picture. This is much more profound than, as profound as this may seem, the present crises. This is just another shot across our bow, frankly, compared to what can and probably will happen.
And certainly, it's a once in a lifetime experience for almost everyone I know. Like, I feel like I have an advantage because I was a history major, so I can imagine a world other than the one that I grew up in and have lived in my whole life. I think for most people, like this is a wake up that, the normal that we have experienced is actually quite a small blip in human history.
It very truly is. A very good friend of mine pointed out once. He said, "This is something we think is so solid and so we take for granted. Civilization." He says, in the course of human events, this is a blip. This is like, a few tens of thousands of years old, and what we call modern civilization, it's a couple of centuries old. And he's saying, how do we know that this isn't just flash in the pan? Because in the context of overall human evolution, human history, this is nothing. We could be saying that it is flash in the pan, that his civilization, at least as we know it, as we've come to take it for granted, again, if it's grown in this direction, and it's been doing this for millennia, this is not some new thing, moving increasingly away from self-reliance, then we very likely have to reinvent civilization, not just community, but re-look back at our long-term history, see where these things arose. These didn't just start with Monsanto and with Valdez, Exxon Valdez, oil spills and things like that. This is just the latest tip of the iceberg. It's just another shot across our bow, and we have to look at them not as individual shots, but as an overall systemic disease. Well, something that has to be dealt with.
So one of the things that I was reflecting back upon with the current situation through the eyes of the stranger is that you have in Hesperia you have vine laws, which essentially say that every homestead, which is somewhere like 50 to 100 people, has to be by law responsible for its own food and fuel and shelter. So essentially self-reliant for the basics. And I thought, that's a nice idea. But now I'm looking at the news and I'm seeing people who essentially are forced to go to work because they're going to starve otherwise. And it really points out we have an entire civilization that's essentially a coercive economic structure that makes people do work that they don't enjoy, that doesn't fulfill them, that doesn't necessarily help anybody else, so that they will not starve and be homeless. And so, thinking back to Asperia, this idea like if I didn't have to pay property taxes, if I didn't have to participate in a money economy, and I could grow my own in connection with my neighbors, that would be a kind of freedom that I find astoundingly profound.
Well, to some extent, like the Asperians, for example, do pay taxes. Indeed, they pay much more taxes than we do, and very willingly and eagerly, because it's contributing to a society. As they call it, paying rent in the larger house, as they call it. And they feel like, and we should. I mean, to the extent that we get a lot for our tax money. But one of there's several distinctions here, several things that kind of mess things up. We tend to assume, number one, we're a society which is completely based on the marketplace. Now, every society, every civilization has an economic system, and they usually have some kind of equivalent of marketplace, even if it's just some place where they all gather at a central rock in the middle of the desert to swap arrowheads for beads or something. There's some kind of a marketplace. Our own marketplace. In other words, I'm not anti-marketplace. In the garden book that you refer to, people are quick to pick up my criticism of the marketplace, and rightly so. But the point that I'm making is the problem is not necessarily with the marketplace, but the nature of the marketplace. And the marketplace should be, and our economic system and our currency, monetary system, and things like that, they are not necessarily inherently flawed, but they should be our servants. And the way we currently do them, we become their servants. We're their slaves. The marketplace forces us, you were just getting at that, to do things, to live in a way that we very much don't want to, but have no choice. There was a time when the way our families and the economy stuff were construed, so that basically, typically the man worked out at some kind of a wage job, and the woman stayed home and kept home and took care of the kids and stuff. And in some cases the other way around. But either way, now it is virtually impossible. Some person pointed out to me that's a luxury for one person to work out, and basically both have to. And some of it has to do with the expectations we've come up with. We have different expectations from leisure and from technology and so on that can't be met except by everyone harnessing themselves to this juggernaut of a economy, of a civilization. And yeah, we have more than we ever did before, but we're in some ways much more deprived than we ever were before. Who has leisure time? It's like we've kind of put ourselves in this situation, and it needn't necessarily be that way. Even though I advocate self-reliance in Asperia, to go back to that example, there's an economy. People trade things. Officially, the system is based on barter, but there's people find other ways of bartering things when it's awkward because you need to make some change or something like that. Certain things that are commodity goods like metal ingots or salt or maple sugar or things like that people will use as coinage, but they're not completely self-sufficient. They're because of the vine laws, as you mentioned. Every stead, in other words, every household, which really is anywhere from 15 to 30 or 40 people, some of them, is responsible for their own food, their own staple foods, and their own domestic fuel. And I make that distinction because they don't have to have every single condiment. They can't use cinnamon unless they grow their own, which they can't. They can't have an industry like a foundry or something that uses charcoal or something unless it's coming from their own place. But it's spelled out in some detail there, basically so that the primary self-sufficiency level is at the stead, household level. And then beyond that, the fairs, which are kind of like our counties, regions, have certain things that they produce in-house, so to speak. Like not every household has to make their own sewing machine or bicycles, but maybe every fair, every county or every region has at least one sewing machine factory, let's say. And this is the kind of thing that gives us the resilience that we're talking about needing in the kind of situation that. Right.
So another question that came up for me based on the juxtaposition of your work and the current crisis is I talk a lot to my sister who lives in Manhattan in an apartment, which I don't believe she's left for almost 2 months now. And are cities inherently unstable? Like those people, they can't produce their own food. They rely on externalities for sewage, for garbage disposal. They have to tap reservoirs that are far away. Should cities disappear?
Well, in a Asparian type world, a world that was configured around self-reliance and sustainability, then they would disappear. You wouldn't have to abolish cities; they would fall apart. In my in the book, there's some allusions to in their distant past during the calamitous times that basically the cities were abandoned by anyone that could, and the people left there. We see this in a lot of these disaster films and futuristic films. Is the people that are left there are the poor people that are kind of foraging among the ruins for whatever little they can get there, and the lucky people are the ones that live out in the boonies. I envision that happening, certainly, and no one's going to cause it to happen except those concentrated populations are inherently, it's built into them that they are unsustainable and they're very vulnerable. You use the word unstable. I don't know how unstable they are. It depends on the context. At some times in a civilization, what could be more stable than New York City? You look at it right now. How can you look at that and say it's unstable? It's so there, and yet not sustainable.
Right. Well,
even worse. You look at someplace like Los Angeles or something where their water would be more basic than water. And yet they have no capacity for supplying their
right.
water.
Well, and we're seeing, protests that to me look like very childish entitlement. Like, I want my beer, I want my frosted ends of my hair, and I'm going to disregard social distancing regulations because of it. You can see like people in cities, like our entire civilization feels very entitled to all the nice things we have, even though they can't be sustained.
Well, of course, the specific example you give, as you say, it is childish, and it's very particularly apropos of the exact situation. The people that are refusing self-quarantine and stuff like that, and having big rallies in the Capitol steps and stuff. They are. I mean, one might. It sounds perverse. One might say, well, at least the stupid people are killing themselves off. If they were just going to go there and they were going to get COVID and they were going to die from it, one might at least get some reassurance from that. But of course, they don't. They take it back to their communities, where a whole lot of people who they infect their families and their friends and their communities who maybe aren't as stupid as they are. But that's in reference to this very specific thing. I'm trying to get a handle on this thought here. If we're talking about things in general, crises and the what you're calling the entitlement thing, the really overarching problem kind of in this, and we're seeing it totally in this, is panic. Is we're so used to what we have, and we maybe forget how vulnerable we are until we start seeing it, and it definitely causes panic. Like I say, people start hoarding ammunition and doing things like that, and that itself is extremely destructive. Again, I don't know what one does about it, except having a kind of resilience built into it so that people don't need to panic. They may suffer, they may have some hardships, but they know they're going to come through it, and that's that kind of feeling that you don't see in anywhere, and certainly in places like Manhattan. You don't see that inward assurance that people feel like it's going to be okay. It's going to be hard for a while, but it's going to be okay. Like during World War II, I mean, we look back with the rose-colored glasses of hindsight, and it was all going to end. Mm-hmm. We were going to win. At that time, it was very uncertain. Our whole civilization was in crisis, and it was not certain how it was going to come out. That's kind of where we're at now, and it's causing people to panic.
Yeah. So I want to talk about scatter seed because we didn't really get into it very much in the last podcast, and so I'm starting to farm seriously now, or garden seriously, and so I look at all the inputs and all the fertility that I need to bring in, and all the implements and the tools, and let's say everything total that I've spent over the last 5 years, let's say, is about $5,000, and I would say probably less than $100 of that is the seeds. And seeds have, I can get this corn, I can get the mortgage lifter tomato, what's the problem with our current commercial seed supply that has these cheap, seemingly plentiful seeds that last a couple of years? What lit a fire under you to start scatter seed that you felt was missing elsewhere?
Well, now, as far as that specific thing, my example is actually quite different from most people. When I first started saving seeds, which eventually turned into scatter seed projects, saving my own seeds, when I first came here, no one was talking about heirloom seeds. No one was talking about genetic erosion, gene pool erosion stuff. At least no one around me was talking about it. I simply came here out of college with this kind of romantic fantasy of being self-reliant, self-sufficient. I was going to grow it all myself. I was going to grow all my food, and because of my rather extreme radical focus on that, is I realized, as kind of what you're applying, I need to, if I'm going to grow my own food, I need to grow the inputs for that food, including the fertilizer and including the seeds. And the fertilizers was one of the things about the same time as seeds. I realized I was working for a dairyman on the other side of town, and I didn't have any access to manure or material for composting, and I worked out a deal. I had lots of cow manure. Well, it immediately occurs to me, they're not my cows. I'm not generating this on my land. They're coming in from somewhere else, even if it's only 5 miles away. So how sustainable is that? So I wanted to find a way of coming up with a food system that did not depend on those inputs, especially since I myself was not eating products from cows. How vegan am I if someone else, my veganism depends on someone somewhere else keeping, killing, eating, slaughtering cows and giving me the byproducts from them. There was a disconnect there. And similarly, with seeds. So when I first started thinking about seeds, I was like everyone else. I go to the seed catalog, seed company, and see what they've got. And it occurred to me that, I don't want to do this year after year, especially for the same seeds. If I get a packet of, like you say, mortgage lister tomato seeds, why should I go back and buy them next year? That's not being very self-sufficient. So I started very slowly at first, learning about which things I could easily save seeds from, and increasingly got into broadening that out. And so unlike many people I know who might keep dozens of varieties of beans or dozens of varieties of tomatoes, I was originally only doing 3 or 4 varieties of each. But I had to also, if I was going to eat kohlrabi, which I had never even had in my life before, but I discovered it and liked it, then I've got to learn how to save kohlrabi seed, which is a lot trickier than beans and tomatoes because it's a cross-pollinator and it's a biennial. You have to jump through some hoops to get kohlrabi seed, and leeks and kale and radishes and all these other things. I had to learn, take it to a new level of seed saving. So that's how I got into it, and in the process I ended up founding the Scatter Seed Project to not only save my own seeds, but to share them with other people. So that's where that focus came from, and also where my focus on veganic farming, realizing that animal manure, however organic it might be, it may be sustainable, but it's not very efficient. The word I coined for it is eco-efficient in terms of what you have to put into it to get something back. It's rather wasteful because manure, after all, of course, is just a residual waste product of the animals eating, and the animal, in fact, destroys in the process of peeing and pooping and breeding and moving and around breathing, consumes roughly 90% of the value of the food it ate. And so if you're going to keep livestock for the sake of meat, milk, leather, eggs, all that stuff, sure, go at it. But the idea that some people have is that they need to keep more animals so they'll have more manure, they'll have more fertility. And that's just looking at it wrong. They are not a net source of fertility. And so I had to look at what is, and I realized that the forests and the grasslands, all of the natural ecosystems, the fertility of the Great Plains is not maintained by bison and antelope. It's maintained by grass, basically. So that's how we evolved toward a food system, an agricultural system, where basically I maintain my gardens with compost or mulches or whatever, but basically from my field, hayfield, and my forest. And similarly with the seed thing, is I'm basically trying to keep, if I'm going to grow something, I'm going to save the seeds of it. And because therefore I don't have any reason to panic. You're talking about, or like I'm telling you, there's people that are going to the seed companies that they usually get all their seeds from, and good heavens, they're out. They're shut down. You thought you were being so self-reliant. Well, if you don't have any control over your seeds, then you may be living in a
right. And a lot of those seeds that I used to get, you can't save seeds, right? Because they're...
That's true. F1 hybrids, for example. And there are also patented seeds that you can't legally. You can save seeds from your own use, but you cannot propagate or sell them and so forth without violating the law. They're patented. So, yeah, you're right. A lot of the seeds, and increasingly companies have gone toward that. There are many companies which, most seed catalogs, if you go through and you look at cucumbers, for example, or corn, you'll have a lot of trouble finding a non-hybrid corn or cucumber that you can save the seed from. With beans, it's not the case, peas and beans. Tomatoes, not quite so much so, but still, lots and lots of stuff. Those have basically pushed all the non-hybrid stuff off the shelf. And again, that makes you, among other things, it makes you a captive customer to the seed company. It does not make you self-reliant and more self-sufficient in any way.
So at some point, though, your interest in saving seeds for your own eco-efficiency and self-reliance turned into something bigger. Like you've talked about genetic diversity of germplasm as essentially an insurance policy against like global human starvation, right?
Exactly. And even before I was quite that visionary, one thing that occurred to me is when I joined the Seed Savers Exchange, for example, started rubbing shoulders with other seed savers, I began realizing there's a vast amount of stuff out there that is not accessible to you or to me if you're used to getting things off the shelf. And so one of the things, a lot of people assume that my scatter seed project deals with rare and endangered varieties, and it certainly does. And a lot of them are in that category. There are many varieties in my collections that I make available that are already, I got them from some seed company. And you could too. But one of the things that my project does, over the years I've had over 5,000 varieties that I've offered. Of many years I've had over 2,000 varieties available at a given year. And my project makes them, for one thing, they're in one place. You can get tons of different things for your garden just from me alone. And although that's also having an awful lot of eggs in one basket. But moreover, even some variety I've got that you could get from Fedco, let's say, or Johnny's. There's a lot of these particularly smaller companies where some guy living out in Seattle or something might not get their catalog, might know about it, might not know that this variety exists. And so one of the things my scatter seed project has done is kind of put them on the shelf, albeit my own shelf, make them widely available. Now, would seed companies resent that I'm taking their seeds and competing with them? Not at all. In fact, some of them are very, very pleased with me because I'm not competing with them. For one thing, if I offer something, I've got a variety of carrot that I offer that you like very much. Maybe you could get it from Fedco, for example, and in fact, you're going to have to. You might get it from me originally, but I don't sell you ounces of seed. I sell one packet, and I sell it to you once. I don't want to see you again next year unless you did something to lose it. And also price to try to not be competitive with them. So you're going to be paying probably 50% more than getting it from someone else if someone else has it. And so you get a variety from me, then basically if you're serious about it, you're going to have to maintain your own seed henceforth. If you're not, then I let you know where you can get it from. So in other words, I'm acting as almost a free advertisement and a popularizer for varieties that someone else has. Then you'll go to Johnny's and get that kind of corn, but you need 10 pounds. You wouldn't have known about that variety unless you saw it in Will Bonsall's scatter seed project. So I'm serving a really big purpose, even to the overall seed industry, by putting stuff out there, by kind of making anyone all over the country aware of thousands of varieties that not just the companies that you're used to dealing with.
But you also talk about like the loss of certain varieties and what that could cost us in terms of global climate instability. Like, I have a garden, and so I will ask local gardeners, hey, what beans grow well here? And I'll get like 12 different answers, and I'll buy a bunch of them, and only 2 of them will work. And some of them are heirloom, and it's hard to find, and I have to work really hard to find those varieties. Like if they disappear and the climate keeps changing, or now that we have fire ants in our garden that we didn't used to have, or like when we lose those genetic stocks, we're like, talk about what the danger is.
Well, like they say, extinction is forever, and that's not just true of polar bears and stuff. It's also true of varieties, and some of these varieties, incidentally, are not all that special. There are many varieties they'll have that is not all that strong with some. This kind of stereotype that heirloom seeds are more resistant or better flavored, not necessarily. In many, many cases they are. They tend to be more resilient, which is not quite the same. A lot of varieties I have may be somewhat vulnerable to this or that disease compared to something that's been bred more recently by Cornell or someone who come up with that variety. Just one example is an heirloom cucumber that I discovered many years ago from the Boothby family here in Livermore, Maine. I got it. It said it had been in their family for many generations, never been commercially offered. I obtained some from them, and I made it available. Other companies got it from me, and it is widely grown in the seed trade. I'm the original, well, actually, they're the original source of it. In any case, one of the problems with it has some resistance to, I think it's either powdery mildew, maybe it's there's some wilt, some disease that usually is not a problem for me, but occasionally it can be a problem. Since then, I believe Cornell has taken that variety and bred from it a strain of the Bluesby blonde cucumber that is resistant to that disease. So it's not like these things aren't capable of being improved upon, and they aren't necessarily that great themselves, but collectively, this is the big thing, collectively they represent a much greater resilience because there are so many variations between them. Some variety, for example, that might seem rather mediocre right now, there's some in my collection. I don't have a lot good to say about it because I haven't noticed anything outstanding about it. It may have in its genes the resistance to some disease which is now just evolving in gardens and fields in the American landscape, that 5 years from now is going to be devastating everything, and this thing just happens to have the resistance to it, which may make it either useful in and of itself or may make it very useful as breeding stock to come up with a whole array of other improved varieties. So this stuff, it's intrinsically valuable beyond the obvious agronomic or agricultural superiority of it. We just need a lot of diversity. Diversity itself is valuable for its own sake, even if the diversity includes a lot of crap.
Because you don't know what's crap yet.
Exactly. And even if I knew now, that whole thing, as I say, could change 5 years from now because something that looks like it's not really worth saving. That's why generally that's one reason why my project is not more self-sustaining fiscally, is because I'm maintaining a lot of stuff, almost indiscriminately. I'm saving lots of stuff that it doesn't get a lot of demand. A lot of people don't ask for it, and there's probably good reasons why. Again, there's an awful lot of books in your library. Sit there for decades. No one ever goes after it. Did they throw it out? Did they decide we need the shelf space for more popular things? No. We try to keep these things going as much as possible for the sake of the diversity. And but therefore, because of that, the amount of my sample fees that I get for things that people actually request barely cover the cost of the sample fees, and it does nothing to cover the cost of the thousands of other varieties that I'm maintaining that don't get requested. Or some variety I may go, maybe this year I get one request for that sample, and maybe not another one for 5 years, and by that time the viability is low, I've got to grow it out again. So these kind of things are not at all financially sustainable. They can't be. If I were a seed company, a very, very different thing, I would take my 1200P varieties, for example, and I'd pick out several dozen of them, perhaps, that are really especially unique, and I'd throw the rest away. I'd take the ones that are popular that everyone wants. But there's the difference between a library and a bookstore, and it's the difference between me and a seed company.
I'm sure Noah's Ark was not a cruise company, right? I'm sure he didn't make money on it.
Right. Well, the analogy that I sometimes am quoted on in the media, even though it's sort of specious because I'm an atheist, but as I pointed out, is that my situation is being Noah. I'm not God. I don't get to decide which things go on the ark, which are the valuable ones or not. My job is to load them all on and keep them alive for 40 days and nights or whatever until we land on Ararat and they all come out and do their thing. So again, I'm maintaining varieties. I've got the crocodiles and the mosquitoes and so on in my collections too. And in the future, at the other end of this disaster, not just the corona thing, but this crisis, whatever we call modern civilization is going through, at the end of it, other people, not me. I basically avoid being a plant breeder. I've accidentally bred a few varieties, very few, but sometimes people refer to me as a plant breeder. I don't know anyone. No one that I know works harder at not being a plant breeder. Every morning I wake up and I think, how can I avoid breeding any new varieties today? My job is to keep them all static. Noah's job was not to breed. He would just keep these things like they are. Don't be any change at all. And in the future, evolution or the plant breeders of the future, they'll decide whether this was worth my keeping, and they'll decide what to do to improve it.
Yeah.
Not my
job. So can you paint a picture for us about what saving seeds actually involves? Because I imagine just, growing the thing, shaking it out, putting it in an envelope, and labeling it and putting it on a shelf somewhere. But it's more than that, isn't it?
It depends completely on which crop. For something like beans and peas, that's pretty much what it is. It's quite simple to do them. And moreover, since they don't cross-pollinate readily, I can and do grow 200-300 varieties of peas or beans right in my same garden. They're only separated by about a foot or so on the trellis that they're supporting. They might cross physically if I have them too close, but they're not. There's no sexual hanky-panky going on there because they do it to themselves. That's not the same with a lot of crops, corn, cucumbers, for example. They will cross-pollinate readily. So in the case of those, I have to isolate them. If I'm doing 10 different cucumber varieties a year, I have to have them in 10 different little gardens, little isolation plots. And so there's that complication of keeping them pure. And then also along with that is the complication of having a large enough population. With some things, with peas, it doesn't matter that much. Usually, with most varieties, there's not that much genetic diversity in the variety to lose too much. If you only have a very few seeds, you'll probably have the whole picture. With corn, for example, you need to have maybe 100, a couple hundred plants, really, to otherwise you might be truncating the genetic diversity of that particular species. So that's an issue. And then the other complication with a lot of these minor crops is a lot of them are biennials. A good example is the rutabaga. I have or did have one of the largest collections of rutabagas on the planet. Most of them are dead now, but once I get some sustainable funding again, I can, in most cases, get them back, either from the original source or from someone who got it from me, such as USDA, and make them available for distribution again. But the problem with rutabagas is that they'll cross with each other. So again, if I'm going to grow, and also that they're biennials. So you could spend years growing rutabagas. I've had people say this with turnips, carrots, rutabagas. I've grown them for years. I've never seen any seeds. How do they get the seeds from it? I always go to the seed catalog. These are biennials. They take 2 years to do their sex thing. And so the first year, you'll never see any seed at all. You'll never see any flowers. And so therefore, you have to overwinter them somehow. Now, I'm in Maine, which is not a banana belt, and it's particularly challenging to maintain them. Only few things can be overwintered in the field, like chicories and parsnips, but pretty much everything else has to go into my root cellar and spend the winter there, and then be brought out in the spring, be replanted in an isolation plot. Then it does its stage, its sexual stage. So these are all additional hoops to get through, and that's one of the reasons why they're a little daunting to a lot of home gardeners that don't want to move on to that level. And that's one of the things that I try to push, is don't be satisfied doing beans and tomatoes. Move on. Wherever you are on this learning curve, keep climbing up higher to get so you can be more responsible for more of your stuff.
So for people who are suburban and they just have a lawn now and they're thinking, well, maybe I'll put in a couple of beds. Like, we're not telling people right now, move to Maine, get a 60-acre farm and change your life. Are there useful things people can do right now to begin gardening that you think are more than just, greenwashing or lip service or feel good?
Absolutely. Sure. They can start spading up their lawn. Get rid of the patio and get rid of the croquet court there, and do what you can right there. You can do a significant amount. You certainly will not grow all your food on that, not even all your vegetables on this space, but you can grow something significant. It'll be that much more than what you're doing before. Also, a lot of people, this is particularly true of urban gardening. I'm not particularly into that because I don't live there and I don't understand the picture quite as well. But I know quite a lot of people that live in urban and even suburban areas that there's maybe a lot of land resource around you that you don't own the deed for. Maybe a vacant lot, a strip along the road, or maybe some nearby, like a hospital or a school or something where there's a lot of land over by the ditch or something. There's a piece that no one ever uses, that one could get permission to use it, perhaps to rent it, or in many cases, I've known several people, their next door neighbor's got a big back lawn that they don't have, and they get permission to use that, or they live on the edge of a farm field. They make an arrangement with the farmer to use some of that, and perhaps they give up some of their, your extra zucchini and tomatoes and stuff to them. But there are lots of things that one can do to leverage this, to improvise a farm when you don't have one.
And if somebody wants to take it to the level that you've taken it, your book is several hundred pages. The Guide to Self-Reliant Gardening, very detail oriented. How can people learn what you have learned without going through the same multi-decade trial and error process? Are there resources beyond your book, places to apprentice, organizations where you can clone Noahs?
Well, of course, you're very much setting me up for a totally self-serving statement. Yeah, buy my book. That works very well. But I'm not sure other resources beyond that. We have a couple or few apprentices some years, and we right now we're not having any openings for apprentices, at least this year, and who knows about next year. And there are resources, and I'm not a good one to tell you what they are. I mean, you can probably get involved in your state's or area organic gardening farming organization or something like that. The key thing I can say is simply do it. Get on the learning curve. Start at the bottom, work your way up. Just go out and do it. And do like I did. Do all the screw-ups you can. Make all the mistakes you can, and fail better next year. And and also people should not assume, in spite of everything I've written, I'm very careful to only write about things that I've actually done. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm doing it all every year. There's a lot of detail about growing your own grain. How can you be really self-reliant unless you're growing your own staples, like grain and potatoes and soybeans, legumes, and things like that? Although I've grown all of those things over time, I'm not growing all of them. The last year or two, I haven't grown any wheat, for example. The only grain I've grown is buckwheat, actually. But ordinarily, I do grow most, if not all, of those things. I've never grown all of my grain. In no year have I ever grown all of my, particularly all my wheat. Yeah, some years I've grown substantial amounts of it. And my feeling has been, and I think anyone else might look at it the same way, even if they carry it to this extreme, is to, if you can't do it all, grow amount, to get your hand in. Just find out how to go about it. Get a feeling for how do you do it, wheat, how do you thresh it, how do you winnow it. Even if you're only doing a half a bushel or some pounds for your own use, that means that when the doo-doo does hit the fan and you end up with a situation like this, you could ratchet up if you needed to. You or community or whoever, you have the skills, the experience, the whatever infrastructure you need, you have the tools. So that's one of the reasons why I've been doing to a very great extreme, even with things that I've never grown all my own sunflower seeds. They're a very big part of my diet, actually. They're my main source of fat, of oil. And yet I buy most of them. But some years I grow varying amounts of them. Some years I've grown most of what I eat. Most years I haven't. So anyone can do that. Don't be put down because you're not doing what someone else has done. No one should feel like, be in awe of Will Bonsall because he's doing all this. For one thing, it's not certain that Will Bonsall is doing all of that now. Will Bonsall has done that. Otherwise, he wouldn't presume to tell you how. But don't think because I'm not doing everything he is, then I must be a failure. I've known other lifestyle gurus and stuff who have kind of portrayed themselves as a do as I do, you can do this, and I'm very loath to do that. For one thing, in recent years, I'm just doing this completely by myself. This would not function as doing farming as a family, and very little apprentice labor, almost no hired labor. So there's a lot of things I'm having to cut back on, aside from the fact that I'm age 70. I'm feeling in great health, but I have some limits on what I can do. And anyone else who recognizes the same thing. Do what you can do. Don't be disappointed because you're not doing what someone else is.
That's beautiful. So I do want to tee you up for some more self-serving information because I think it is, it's serving all of us. The work you're doing with scatter seed, the education you're providing, and this model for Eve Enterprises. So. I know we've talked offline about that. This is a challenging time for you financially. What are some ways that people can help?
Oh, thank you very much for that. I was going to get to it if you didn't. As far as helping the Scatter Seed Project, and in fact even conceivably helping the Eve thing get kick-started, if anyone wants to know I have a Facebook account now, by the way, which I've never had in my life, never intended or wanted to have, but my helper has set it up for me, so one can find me on Facebook under Will Bonsall. They can, anyone needing to pay me planting seeds, if they go to the Grassroots Seed Network, and find my listing there and want seeds, they can pay me.
So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But if you just search for Grassroots Seeds Network. Seed Network, singular. Grassroots Seed Network. If you just search Google, you'll find it. Yes,
that's it. And if anyone goes there and either wants to buy seeds or a donation or whatever, there's all the usual I've always had is cash, checks, money order. But now I've added on PayPal. Again, that's a big leap for me. Instagram, I have an Instagram account, which I never even knew how it is, what it works. My helper has set that up, so you can find me on Instagram at scatterseedproject.org. And also, my helper set up a Patreon account. I never even knew anything about that. Basically a way for people wanting to donate to something or to pledge to something. And that would be under Will Bonsall and / Scatter Seed Project, I believe. So yes, anyone would be more than welcome, anyone too that wishes to help any aspect of this to any level they can. It's very, very, very helpful, especially right now.
Great. And you're not an official 501c3 nonprofit, right?
Yeah, well, we are now the Eve, of which Scatterseed is functioning as a division of it. Eve is incorporated in the state of Maine as a nonprofit organization. As far as being federally recognized, that's in the process right now. So I don't know if right now if anyone can make deductible donations. I think they can. I think they can. It would be kind of in limbo until federal IRS does finish this.
Gotcha.
Program.
And you're also looking for investors in Eve. So what if someone's got, extra cash lying around to invest, what sorts of questions should they be asking themselves before getting in touch with you?
Well, we aren't so much looking for, we are looking for investors. We've been mainly approaching people locally who have a vested interest in having this local project get going. But anyone who is, probably the first thing would be simply to contact me, and we could talk, particularly if anyone is contemplating a larger thing. Right now we have an arrangement which I call, what am I calling it? Loanation, which is basically if someone wants to donate money to this project but doesn't want to totally donate, they might want to get it back someday. So in other words, if they're loaning it, and it basically sounds like a bank loan. There's probably, as I envision this thing, we haven't done this with anyone yet. I envision this being kind of like a bank loan with usual 10-year thing and 6% interest. And I plan on putting some of my own money into this as much as I can, which isn't much. Some other people are looking at this. In my own case, I would put it in, probably never want to get it back. It would be a donation. But so in other words, if someone wants to put a lot of money into this but isn't quite want to totally commit this forever, wants the opportunity of, if they have to for some reason later, that's an option. But that's, I guess, the sort of thing I'm envisioning at this point.
Gotcha.
For smaller amounts, of course, anyone simply could make a donation to the things we just
right. And so for people who are thinking, like, looking for places where money can go now that would be helpful, like, I can't think of anything more important than Scatterseed, than promoting veganic, sustainable agriculture, and spreading this model. The silver lining of this pandemic, as you said, is it's not the Black Plague. It's not going to kill a third of us. It's a shot across the bow, but it's a wake-up call. And it's a wake-up call that the ways that we have thought about the world have proven inadequate for most of us. But you've been, you and many other people have been pointing this out for decades, and you, I think, uniquely have a set of tools and skills and steps and processes and tactics and answers for people who otherwise would simply be shaking their heads and saying, our ship is sinking. I don't know what to do about it. So this.
I hope so. We can't give up. We have to have a reason to get up in the morning, and otherwise we might just go, and get drunk or something. I agree with what you said, obviously, that you don't know anything more relevant, a better way of putting money. Well, I think so, too, because I'm me. But as far as other people deciding a priority over anything else they might want to invest money or donate money to, I would say this should have a particular appeal to a few demographics. Number one, vegans, particularly because of the system of farming that we're promoting, and a model of farming processing model. Maybe someday they'll be able to buy Eve products off the shelf in their local health food store that are produced here. But anyway, that's people that are into a vegan economy, a vegan diet, should find this very apropos. I don't know of anything else like it anywhere. Several people have said they don't know of any other vegan health food store, for example, and especially a cluster of enterprises like this. I would think it would also appeal to people that are concerned about, again, the genetic erosion thing, the seed saving thing. And I would think it would also appeal to people that are concerned about local economies, even though this particularly relevant for my local economy. As I say, I envision it expanding to include other economies, if other communities, if only as a model, as an example, a successful thing, blueprint that someone might copy to whatever they want to. So I would think those would be the groups who I would knock on their door saying, hey, well, yeah, you want to, I would hold out the cup, and maybe this is something you would like.
Right,
to
and if you want to do this in your local area, And like I would want you to do as many things as possible so that I can, copy your successes and avoid your failures.
Exactly. Anything that you're in North Carolina, anyone that someone in North Carolina were to invest in Eve or Scatter Seed Project would not help their immediate community, and not directly. It would in the longer run, particularly, like I say, by providing a successful model that others can use as a blueprint. It's really nice if someone has been there before. If you're exploring some new countryside, it's really nice to find a path that someone has marked for you. So that's kind of what we hope this to be in the bigger picture, aside from the immediate.
Right. So folks can find you if they just search for your name on Facebook, just to friend you, and the last name is spelled Bonsall. They can find you at scatterseedproject.org. I'll put the links to the Grassroots Seed Network and for Instagram and whatever else. I'll put a link to the Boothby Blonde cucumbers if people.
Well, you know what, Howard? I'm going to do something else also. I'm very terrible about this. I'll probably regret it tomorrow. But I tend to be very promiscuous with my email address. If you think it's a good idea, I will just tell people they can find me. They can write to me at Will Bonsall is at wabonsall@gmail.com.
Okay.
I'll probably regret this. I've already got a big queue, big queues of seed requests and information and stuff already on my computer, but I do like to.
Okay, great. So I'm going to encourage people who want to help to contact you first, and people who want help to.
Okay, if they send me a message, they may not hear from me within an hour of their message, unless they say I want to donate $1 million in your project. If they got some particular request, they'll hear from me sooner or later. But like I say, as the dust clears away, I'll hopefully.
Okay, great. That's very generous of you. So, Will, thank you again for your vision, for your hard work. I'm looking forward to the second edition of the Yarrow Tales to find out how he takes his knowledge and returns to a broken civilization to try to fix it, which is something that I think we're all going to be up to for the next foreseeable future.
And thank you very much, Howard, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, be well, and so folks, let's make this happen. Let's make Scatter Seed and Eve a thing that can help us move into a more self-reliant, sustainable, elegant, and happier future. So, Will, thank you again for everything.
Thank you again, and to all your listeners, keep well, keep safe.
Okay, so if you found that conversation as earth-shakingly important as I did, I hope you'll do a few things. One, I hope you will share this. Even just email a link to this podcast to just one other person and say, hey, this would be great to give a listen to. Second, I hope you will support Will by going to you can also go to scatterseedproject.org. If that has a link to the Patreon on the donate page. It also has a link to just make a PayPal donation if you don't want to be ongoing. But I would encourage you, if this is important to you, to become an ongoing sustainer so that Will has a reliable source of funding that he can count on to know that he can keep doing this work, that he can hire people, that he can get some better cold storage, things that you have to keep paying for, the electricity for that, on a regular basis, much better from his perspective to have an ongoing, reliable source of funding. I know he's on the way to making a 501c3 so these can be tax deductible, but right now we just need to get him some funds to help him keep going. He's one of the most selfless, hardworking, wise people I've ever met, and I would hate for his work to die on the vine because we couldn't figure out how to support it. Let's see, what else is going on? In running news, I've been doing 6 milers, 7 milers real slow and alternating with walking days. Been still doing a lot of gardening, preparing beds, clearing weeds, putting down wood chips and mulch. So I feel like I'm getting my exercise there. My eating has been pretty shitty for the past couple of weeks. Just a lot more, semi-junky food, sweets. And I've put on a few pounds that I'm not happy with. And I feel like, I woke up yesterday and decided I was going to do something about it. So I started with a 1-day water fast, and now I'm going to add some raw stuff in for the next couple of days and then ease my way back. Hopefully, I know that I'll adjust my taste buds to the point where the foods that I'm happy eating that are good for my health are going to be, exciting again when I drop that. So if that's you too, know that you're not alone. Know that it's totally understandable during this stressful time to gain a few pounds, to let some things slip, but also know that you can turn it around. If you'd like to work with me to turn it around, my laser coaching program, I've decided to go with a pay what you can model, or a pay from the heart model. I've set a minimum, which is half of what I normally charge. So less than $1,000 for an entire year of unlimited laser coaching. I encourage you to pay more if you can, up to the retail price of $19.97 for the year. And if you'd like to pay more than that, I can apply that to a scholarship fund to help people for whom the $9.97 is unreachable. So I really want to help people the way, I've been helping myself with these techniques that can really turn things around. The idea of being healthy is not that you never slip up. It's that you know how to get back on track and that you do it quicker and quicker each time. So these little ratchets of the wrench, as Josh LaJaunie likes to put it, don't take you far back in unhealthy directions. To find out more about laser coaching and to sign up, just go to plantyourself.com/laser. Also, if you are interested in becoming a health coach, we're running a new cohort of the WellStart Health Coach Training Program. You can find out more and register for an enrollment interview in which you interview me and I interview you to figure out if it's a good fit. And you can find that at wellstartcoach.com. We're starting the new cohort on May 18th. All right, so the running news already included a lot of the gardening news. Basically, we're just working on self-reliance, adding a lot more calorie crops, looking to put some potatoes in. And our neighbor has a garden that is full of overwintered volunteer rye that he hasn't harvested this year. They're getting on in years, and he doesn't have the time or energy to really tend the garden. So we've talked about us taking it over and sharing the bounty with him and also with the local food pantry. Time for thanks. Thanks, of course, to Will Ridenauer for Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace, the theme music for this show. I know I've been a little bit lackadaisical about using it ever since I came back from South Africa with this whole new podcast, but I love it so much. I'm still going to keep using it, so here it is now. And, of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Morrow, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Scharf, Tina Ahern, Jen Volkanovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elsbeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gil Lassert, David Donahue, Blair Seibert, Dorona Vizov, Juan, Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Funderburk, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Aviva Lael, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Martha Bergner, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, The Inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Sharp, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch of Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Koppel, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Shannon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Home Hedegaard, Isa Tuzin-Wa, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Olakoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen and Joe Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justine Divitt, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Emily Iaconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McEntee, Dan McCorney, Stephen Leenan, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bill Brielf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Tricia Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunmarie Hagen, Tracy Gullidge, Laura Heaton, Meg from Amistez, Rochelle Kennedy, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, Holly Butler, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sarah Lee Robertson, Param Ganchi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Olga Sidorowska, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lori Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owens, and Sagar Naik for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for today. As always, be well, my friends. All right, time for thanks. Thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use his beautiful song Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace. You can find more of Will's music at his website, willridenauer.com. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Mr. Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Sharp, Tina Ahern, Jennifer Volkanovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X. Elspeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Janet Selby. Hi, Janet. Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gil Lacerte, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesen, Ruth Ann Funderburg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, The Equally Mysterious, Tracy Z, Aviva Lael, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Martha Bergner, Susan Ahmad, Nolly Levine, The Inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, The Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Sharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch at Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Coble, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Shannon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Holm Hedegaard, Izatu Zinwa, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlikoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Mirani, Karen Jo Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justin Divich, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Emily Iaconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Picorni, Stephen Lehman, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bill Brielf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Trish Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunmarie Hagan, Tracy Gullidge, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Rochelle Kennedy, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, Holly Butler, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Paran Ganshi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Olga Sidorowska, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owen, Sagar Nayak, Erica Piedra, Danielle Roberts, and Michael Lushton for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for now. As always, be well, my friends.